This is Alec Ross. If you're going to tweet his Twitter handle, it's Alec J. Ross. Alec Ross is apparently some raving maniac who has stolen his Twitter handle. So I just want to preface, before we came on, somebody said, I'm coming to see you guys speak because I heard you're both really handsome. So we'd like you to use the hashtag, Nick Bilton and Alec Ross are really handsome, if you tweet about this. Just kidding. So Alec is he works for the US State Department, and you're a senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, is that correct? And Alec has been responsible for really been at the forefront of digital diplomacy in the United States, and worked with a team at the State Department that's helped really bring Twitter, Facebook, and other social media to the world. And did I introduce you correctly? Is that right?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, so I have a question.
Bringing punk rock to foreign policy.
What's that?
Bringing punk rock to foreign policy.
Bringing punk rock to foreign policy.
That's what I'm trying to do.
And he's also gotten into a lot of trouble, which is really good. So I have a question. Have you ever killed a man with a tweet?
If I have, I'm not aware of it. I do think some people have gotten killed because of tweets, but I don't think any of my tweets were the cause of their...
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think that people in Iran and Syria have been targeted because of their social media communications. I think that they've been identified through basically the thumbprints over their electronic communications, arrested and killed. So
that actually brings me to one of my first questions. So a friend of mine from Egypt said that, you know, during the Egyptian revolution, there were people that were able to use Twitter to help organize the revolution because the government at the time didn't know what it was. And now, because they're aware of it, when they try to you know, enact more protests, the government has accounts where they go in and they create, you know, false information and all these different things. How are you guys at the State Department doing anything to try to help people decipher what's going on, or what is the solution to that?
Yeah, so chapter 1, page 1 of in the How to Be a Dictator's Handbook says that in times of unrest, turn off the internet, turn off mobile networks. Now, chapter 1, page 2 in the How to Be a Dictator's Handbook says that if anticipating unrest in the future, try to control the information networks in your countries. That's why billions, if not tens of billions of dollars have been spent in the last couple of years on surveillance technologies. And so, yeah, look, the State Department, we've spent about $100 million since Hillary Clinton's been Secretary of State on a variety of different technologies, the purpose of which is to allow people to be able to communicate safely, anonymously, and other such things in environments where governments are trying to intercept communications and, based on what they learn, kill them.
So what happens in a situation in Iran where the government actually literally shuts down the internet, and you have, you know, people that have no Facebook, no Twitter? Are there solutions to that, to be able to allow people to still reach the outside world?
So in an environment where a country says, you know what, we're willing to shut down everything, it's very hard to set up new ad hoc networks. On the first day of the revolution in Libya, Muammar al-Gaddafi's oldest son, turned off all the communications networks in the country. And then, you know, I worked with the Brits, the Emiratis, and others with the rebels in eastern Libya to restore communications. But if a government
how did you restore communications while the government shuts them down?
So what we did is
do you go in there and like plug in a Wi-Fi hotspot somewhere, or?
So, you know, what I can say about it is that part of what we did is we worked to smuggle fiber in across the eastern border into rebel-held territory in the east and bring in bandwidth that was non-terrestrial, so meaning from satellites and things like this.
So you're, you know, in the past, the, you know, CIA would have gone into Afghanistan and smuggled guns in to help overthrow the government. Now you're smuggling fiber in there, is that right?
Yeah. The difference too, though, is this is overt and not covert. So the CIA, in order for the CIA to do something, you have to be hiding the hand of government. It has to be something that's covert in nature. But as all of you understand, in this highly networked world, in many respects, the overt is more powerful than the covert. So things that we're doing, these technologies we're developing and other such things, instead of it being done where we're hiding the hand of the American government or doing it under cover of night, we're doing it, if not publicly, then we're at least not masking our identities. So this is where the State Department does things that maybe during the Cold War would have looked and felt more like the CIA.
So there's a report that came out yesterday, I believe it's from Twitter actually, where 100% of senators and 90% of the House are now active on Twitter. What is it with diplomats in the United States, and do you see a world where every member of government has to be on Twitter?
You know, I don't think we want every member of government on Twitter. That'd be incredibly boring. I think that, look, if I've learned one thing in the last 4 years working for Hillary Clinton, it's that there's a big shift in power from hierarchies like the nation state to citizens and networks of citizens. And technologies like Twitter facilitate that shift in power. So if the old white shirt, red tie, pinstripe suit bureaucrat is going to remain powerful in a networked world, then he or she has to be sophisticated about how to use social media tools. So it's increasingly the case that good diplomats, good foreign policy practitioners are sophisticated about how to use tools like Twitter.
So as a reporter in Silicon Valley, every week there's a new something. There's Instagram, there's Snapchat, there's all these different things. I know that you guys monitor the main big social networks, but do you look at these other new technologies that are coming out and how they could be used? For example, have you Snapchatted with Hillary Clinton ever, or?
I haven't, but I actually think the government is really bad at being an early adopter of technology. I actually don't think we need to be at the head of the pack. I think it's better for us to just be able to keep up with where the rest of the citizens are.
But the head of the pack changes so drastically quickly. I mean, Instagram a couple of years ago didn't exist. Now it's 90 million active users a month.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think people will be organizing revolutions through it, but they'll be organizing sunsets and cappuccino pictures. But still, do you monitor things like that?
We do. So when I came in, there were basically 2 of us digital diplomats, and there are now 155 of us. So we've gone from having 2 people that focus on these issues to 155.
So is that 153 new jobs that have been created specifically for digital?
Yes.
Wow. Did people get fired?
Well, they could either learn new skills or go find new jobs.
Got it. A newspaper.
Yeah.
So how do you measure the understanding of what's happening on these networks? Do you have analytics at the State Department, or are you hitting refresh on Ahmadinejad's Facebook page to see when he updates his status to say I just killed a bunch of Iranians?
So if I wanted to be a billionaire tomorrow, like if my goal were to leave government and do something that would make me a billionaire as fast as possible, I would start an analytics company. Because speaking for my own government and knowing from very many others, I think that a lot of the analytics tools that are out there are pretty crude. And we have a lot of money. So we are happy spending a lot of money on whatever the most sophisticated social media analytics tools are. But I think that I think that if what you really want are tools that really allow you to look around the corner in the development of political movements and other such things, I think what's out there right now is pretty crude. And I think there's a lot of room for innovation.
Are you using that crude out-of-the-box stuff, or do you have secret spy stuff that's on your iPhone right now?
Well, there's nothing secret on my iPhone.
BlackBerry?
If there were anything secret, I wouldn't tell you.
All right, so you've probably seen some pretty cool things at the State Department, and I'm sure you've seen some secret things. Tell me one. No one else. Just pretend no one else is here.
Just between us.
Me and you.
All right.
Getting a glass of orange juice.
There are 2 projects that are declassified that I can talk about in the intimacy of this, quiet little chat. One is a panic button. So one of the things that we saw after some of the revolutions, most notably in Iran, was that whenever people were arrested, one of the first things that the police did, is they would take the person's mobile phone, and the address book, all their SMS, all their emails, was like a guidebook to the resistance. So one of the things that we created, which has been used very effectively, is a panic button. So if you're in danger of being taken down by the secret police, by the Mukhabarat or something like that, you can just put in a code. It wipes and stores your address book, your SMS, and your emails to the cloud in a way that can't be keyed out if you're being tortured.
And so is that like an iPhone app I can download and?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yep. That's why I can talk about it. It's overt. It's unclassified. We actually want people to know about this. Now, I don't think this is a big problem in Munich. I don't think you need a panic button in Munich. And looking around this crowd, even though a couple of you are sketchy, I don't think too many of you are necessarily going to need it. But yeah.
So what's the second project?
So the second one is, it's called the Commotion Project. And it's based out of an entity called the New America Foundation. Some people, it's euphemistically known as the Internet in a Suitcase. And basically what that allows is for, in a place where the Internet has been shut down, in something about the size of a suitcase, something that enables the creation of a new network.
And is the idea that you run across the border of Iran, drop your internet suitcase and pretend it's not yours, and all of a sudden there's internet?
Either that, or these suitcases are already in countries where, the government might shut down the internet sometime.
That's not my internet suitcase. No,
yeah, that's right.
So are they around the internet suitcases, or?
It's being tested. It's out in the field.
Very, very exciting. So I read in October.
Your taxpayer dollars at work.
Good, that's good. Is it a big suitcase, little suitcase? What does it look like? I read the piece that I know you read by Malcolm Gladwell, and I know it's been discussed before, but you and I were chatting about it the other day, and Malcolm Gladwell said, and I totally disagree with him, I think he was off his meds when he said it, but he said that Twitter and Facebook and all these things did not contribute to the revolutions in the Middle East. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's notable that he actually wrote that before the revolutions there. So he wrote it after Iran, before the Middle East. I don't think he'd write that article now. I think that, basically what the New Yorker should do is take that article and reclassify it from nonfiction to fiction. Because if you look, even though I don't believe that these were Twitter revolutions or Facebook revolutions, I do think that these tools definitively did three things. Number one, they accelerated movement making. It took movements that historically would have taken months or years to develop and enabled them to develop in days or weeks. Number two, it enriched the information environment. So the ability of a dictator to control the information that one citizen gets is remarkably reduced. And number three is it facilitates leaderlessness. There's nobody's face you're going to put on a t-shirt from the revolutions in Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, or elsewhere. And that's because the leadership structures of these revolutions look more like the internet itself, like a web than like a pyramid.
So one of your colleagues, Jared Cohen, and his colleague, Eric Schmidt from Google, recently took a trip to North Korea. What's going on there? Are we going to see the internet there in the next year or so, or is it quite a ways out, if ever?
So I'm very skeptical about the likelihood of the regime in North Korea allowing the internet in, even though, my friends Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen just visited with them. I doubt they persuaded them. And the reason for it is very simple. I think that if citizens in North Korea see how good life is in South Korea, then I think the regime in North Korea is in a lot of trouble. They have to have a completely blacked out information environment because they couldn't get away with it if anybody has any awareness of what's going on around much of the rest of the world. Now, mobile phones are already penetrating increasingly into North Korea, so light is being brought into that historically dark place. But I don't see the government voluntarily letting the internet in.
So you bring up mobile phones just now. The latest numbers are that there are 1 billion smartphones in the world and 5 billion feature phones. So these revolutions are great if you have a smartphone, but are they great if you have a pink razor or something like that?
Yeah, so the question though, the thing here is how do the elites, the people with the smartphones, mobilize people on the ground? So not every individual in the square protesting or being a part of a political movement has to be somebody, curating information on the net or something like this. Rather, there have to be some members of the community who in turn can lead those who may not be as plugged in. So I don't think that everybody needs to be hyper-networked, but you also can't have a blacked-out environment.
You've talked a lot about examples of digital diplomacy that have worked. Give me some examples of where it hasn't worked, where you've failed.
Yeah, so the one place where everything I have tried has just flat out failed is in the Congo. In Eastern Congo, I think it's the toughest place on earth. There's just rampant rape, rampant violence. And I've spent a lot of time in Eastern Congo and have tried to basically hack solutions to using communications networks to keep vulnerable people safer from sexual predation and other such things. And everything I've tried there has failed. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's sort of a software solution or a mobile solution to the problem.
Why has it specifically failed there?
Well, one example is, one of the things that I tried to do was get the UN, the peacekeeping force there, to take the information it had about these rogue militias that are wandering the hills and are usually the ones who are raping people in these refugee camps. I wanted to create a text messaging system where, as they monitored the movements of these militias, the information would be text messaged to the refugee camp administrators, NGOs, and others. And basically, we could not prove to them that the communications would be invulnerable to intercept. We couldn't make it a bulletproof system, so they were unwilling to put it in place.
This week, well, about 20 minutes ago, President Obama got sworn in for a second term. I believe, is Kerry in now as Secretary of State, or is it the transition happening?
Couple weeks. He's transitioning in now, but he'll be in office in a couple weeks.
So John Kerry has a Twitter account, and he's on Facebook and so on. We're not friends on Facebook. He didn't accept my friend request. But is it going to change, what you've been doing, this digital diplomacy with him, and if so, how?
So nothing's going to be reversed because you can't reverse the tide of history. The United States, we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. But one of the things we care about is the exercise of power. And in order to be powerful in our networked world, you have to be very sophisticated about 21st century statecraft. And I don't think John Kerry is going to cede power. So he will continue to be muscular there.
And just one last question for you. What's next for you? I had an idea. We were talking in the back, and somebody suggested that you start a reality TV show called Inside State, where you, Hillary Clinton, and Snooki live together for a week. Is that true? Is that possible?
I think that there will be a casualty there. It would be more like Survivor than anything else. No, I've got to figure out what's next. I can stay in government, I can leave, but it's been a good 4-year run, 6 years if you include the campaign.
I have an idea. Go build an analytics company, make $1 billion.
There you go.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.